Do you want to learn effective ways to build relationships, generate sales, and grow your business from successful entrepreneurs, startups, and CEOs without listening to a long interview? If so, you've come to the right place. Gresham Harkless values your time and is ready to share with you precisely the information you're in search of. This is the IAM158 podcast.
Hello. This is Gresh from the IAM158 podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Nathan Poole McCullough of Rising Phoenix Wellness. Nathan, it's awesome to have you on the show.
It's awesome to be here, brother. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And what I wanted to do was just read a little bit more about Nathan so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And Nathan is a holistic entrepreneur focusing on human optimization. His focus is on removing the blocks from people achieving optimal levels of health, wellness, and happiness and becoming the best versions of themselves. Nathan, are you ready to speak to the IAM158 community?
I'm ready, brother.
Awesome. Let's do it. So the first question I had was just to hear a little bit more about your CEO story and what led you to start your business.
Wow. I guess the real launch pad was I got my master's degree in philosophy in 2012 and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with that. In 2008, they took most of the funding away from like higher education. And so I got sort of left in a spot where I decided to finish out my education, but was in a ton of debt and was looking at basically living, being a professor and sort of living the broke college professor lifestyle. And I think I wasn't going to get out of debt until I was about 70 years old or something. And at that time, I played collegiate sports and, my body was breaking down a little bit. And I got really into nutrition and wellness at that time. So I did a couple of personal development courses, and I just decided that I wanted to explore entrepreneurship. It's something that I did when I was much younger. I sold baseball cards, and I started a painting company. It was like when I was 17 years old, and paid for the first couple of years of my undergraduate that way, and then kind of lost track of the sort of entrepreneurial way for a while because I got really fascinated by philosophy and higher education. And then when I came back to it, and I decided to move. I had a friend of mine that was growing. I was getting ready to launch a company in New Zealand. It was a wellness franchise of wellness clinics. And he had been calling me for years to try to get me to come out and partner with him. And, I was just really on the philosophy track and just couldn't be sort of persuaded. And then when the economy took a real big downturn, it was enough to propel me to take a look. So I just decided I'm going to go for it and take a leap into it. And that was my first sort of foray back into entrepreneurship and growing the business. It was in the area of health and wellness, which was already a big passion of mine. And the rest is history.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's always interesting. I remember when I was graduating during the economic crisis, and I heard that a lot of the most successful businesses and organizations actually it sounds counterintuitive, but started during an economic crisis because it presents like a huge opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners. So a lot of the best, and most successful businesses and entrepreneurs actually started during those down times, as crazy as it seems.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
And I wanted to drill down a little bit deeper and hear exactly what you're doing with Rising Phoenix Wellness. Could you tell us a little bit about how you're serving the clients that you're working with?
Yeah. So I think most of my clients are, people that have experienced a sort of a breakdown in their health, or they're coming up against some sort of crisis. Right after I sort of jumped into my entrepreneurial journey, I had a breakdown in terms of my own health. I started drinking a lot and getting into substances. And so I used my own path in health and wellness to sort of heal myself. And that really is where I come from now in terms of going through recovery and using entrepreneurship as something to sort of direct my obsessive kind of personality into. And I got really hyper-focused into healing modalities and a lot of mindfulness practice and, doing a lot of spiritual retreats. A lot of the same strategies that I used to get well are the same ones that I use with the clients that I have now. So I focus a lot on, like you were saying in the beginning, working on the blocks that people have. I tend to get a lot of guys that are, in business, and they're using different strategies that don't serve them to deal with stress. And for whatever reason, I think I just manifest that particular type of people. But that's a lot of my main focus. Is those are the talks that I do in public are generally around those areas. And that's generally what shows up for me. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and working with people online, and then I do a lot of group programs as well, where we walk people through detox, holistic cleanses, things like that, as a sort of usually a first step into wellness based recovery, and going back to people reconnecting with themselves.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And and I've always heard that too. Usually entrepreneurs and business owners are kind of built in a unique way, I should say. So sometimes it all depends on what what mission you're on. So sometimes it can go, left or right. It just depends on and how you kind of put that energy, put that kind of entrepreneurial way and if you're pointed towards a certain goal. So it's great to hear that you've been able to not only do that for yourself, but you're also helping out, sounds like similar people as well. And now I wanted to ask you for what I call your secret sauce. And this is kind of what you feel kind of sets you apart or distinguishes you or your organization.
I think what sets me apart is, in a lot of ways, it's the darkness that I went through. I really feel like, what's that movie with Batman where the he's born in the darkness?
It's not the Dark Knight though, right?
I can't remember the guy that wears the mask. Anyway, when he's fighting Batman, he says, he doesn't have any problem fighting in the dark.
Yeah.
And Rising Phoenix Wellness is an homage to, obviously the bird that comes out of the ashes. And so I feel like when I work with people, there's no judgment, because regardless of what they've done, I've done some really depraved, I can bring that to people and, bring that relatedness and bring that ability to bring perspective in dark times, or bring, awareness and mindfulness when people are going through difficult times. So I think that really gives me a unique, position and thread to work with when I'm working with people, because they know that the space is safe. There's no judgment. And, I think also that's given me a really unique advantage when it comes to the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship. You really have to have persistence and resilience more than anything else, because there's just going to be really shitty times. And so I think in my coaching, I think that's what gives me a really good leg up. And then also just in entrepreneurship in general, I really believe that you can't kill me, right? There's nothing that can keep me down. So I've lived in, 4 or 5 different countries. I've slept on couches. I've done everything when I've been getting my business up and going. So, I feel like you can't kill me. So I feel like that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. If you have that persistence and you have that will, it's hard to be somebody that won't give up. That's what I always say. So that's a great reminder. And I think a great example of a secret sauce. And now I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask you for what I call a CEO hack. And this might be an app, a book, or a habit that you have, but it's something that you feel kind of makes you more effective and efficient as an entrepreneur and business owner.
A CEO hack. Well, I think there's 2 things. I mean, the first one is, hopefully people are already doing this, but using a Google Calendar or something to map your whole life. So when I was going through my early leadership and coaching programs with a company called Landmark, they really drilled into me the use of time to, well, like Grant Cardone says, you have to dominate time, right? You have to be the one that's cause, not at the effect of time, because most people do not do that well. And if you can schedule your life and make sure that like I always teach people, take the 5 things that are the most important to them and make sure that that's the number one priority when you put it in your calendar, and then you schedule your clients, you schedule your days around those things. The more your days are scheduled and the more that you have your time mapped out in advance, you can be so much more present when you're with people. You can be so much more effective because you're not in overwhelm, because you know where you're supposed to be and when. And for me, having a really good grasp over that is so critical. I listened to a podcast one time with Tom Brady, and he said that he has 365 days in his year planned out. He knows when he's eating, when his practices are, when his press conferences are. Everything is set out in advance. And the person was like, well, don't you think that's a little OCD? And he said, yeah, you can look at it that way. But the other way to look at it is because he knows everything that's coming. There's a very low chance of being blindsided by everything. He can be present in every moment. He doesn't have to worry about, did he forget something? So I feel like that is just a massive skill that the most effective entrepreneurs master, and the newbies generally struggle with a lot.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, you can always say control what you can control. If you can plan out as much as possible and know exactly what you're going to do and be able to kind of understand that everything's not going to go according to plan, but you plan out what you can. Like he said, Tom Brady knows when his workouts are, what he's going to do for the next 365 days of the year. That gives you an advantage. So I definitely love that CEO hack. And now I wanted to ask you for a CEO nugget. This might be a word of wisdom or piece of advice, or if you can hop into a time machine, what would you tell your younger business self?
To me, I think the most important thing, and I think I really follow Gary Vee on this, and that is, it's a marathon, man. If you're in this for real, which if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to be in for real, which means you're in for the long haul. And it doesn't mean that your business is always going to look the same in 1 year's time, 2 years time, 4 years time, 10 years time. It's not. God knows my business is like totally changed from when I first started. It grows organically. But I think the one thing that I've done well, and I will always teach the people that I mentor, is do not get caught up in like the small stuff. This is a marathon. You're going to go through times when it feels like it's imploding, and that's okay. You know what I mean? We all go through that. It's part of the journey. That's what has people quit. And that's what has, the people that win, they deserve to win. And I think that's just so huge, is being able to keep that mentality intact, where it's like, this is a long haul. I cannot be killed no matter what happens. And you just gotta, if you're willing to keep getting up and keep putting one leg in front of the other, even when it's like everything's cramped up, you don't feel like there's any fuel in the tank. If you have the capacity, which is all up here, man, it's all psychological, to be able to remember that this is a marathon, and this is part of the process, and everything is happening for me, not to me, I think people will be just fine. But I think in the grand scheme of things, with the sort of immediacy that we have in our culture at the moment, with everything goes so quickly and everything's so fast, when I'm coaching millennials now, man, more and more I see they want to make $1 million in 6 months, or they feel like it's not working, or you know what I mean? It's just like, man, that was not in the consciousness when I first started, hustling. And I think there's one thing that you can teach the young people is, don't give up on the massive, the 10x and the 100x thinking and the that type of mentality. But like Gary Vee says, you know what I mean? Do not discount the 100K a year. You know what I mean? Understand that it takes time. This is a marathon, and have that mentality. I think that's the key for me.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think that's a great reminder to, like you said, the way the world is sometimes, you want everything to happen yesterday or a week ago. But in reality, it takes time to do that. And it is a marathon in order for you to sometimes reach your goals. So I think that's a phenomenal reminder. And now I wanted to ask you my absolute favorite question, which is the definition for what it means to be a CEO. And we're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show, and entrepreneurs and business owners, and look at what that means. So I wanted to ask you, Nathan, what does being a CEO mean to you?
So, man, that's a great question. I think for me, being a CEO means two things in particular that jump right off the top of my head. One is being 100% responsible for everything. Being able to have the mentality where it's not just the victories that you take responsibility for, especially for me, I'm coaching, I have about whatever. So first definition is you're 100% responsible for everything. That's got to be the attitude. And the second thing is that everything rises and falls on leadership, as John Maxwell says. You're the law of the lid. You're the lid, and you have to be self-aware enough to know, when you're getting in the way, and when you're, in leading by example. I think that's just so critical, is, the idea that you can never ask anybody to do anything that you haven't done or that you're unwilling to do. And so those are the two things that I always keep in mind. I have to lead by example no matter what, even if I don't feel like it. And I'm 100% responsible for everybody's results, no matter what. I feel like those are the two mindsets that I'm constantly trying to keep in my own head when it comes to, am I being effective when I'm doing my own self-analysis in terms of our organization? If I'm doing those two things well, generally, things are going pretty well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I love those two kind of parts of the definition. And I think that's a great thing to kind of keep in mind for anybody that's, out here hustling as a CEO, entrepreneur, business owner. So Nathan, I truly appreciate you for taking some time out of your schedule. What I wanted to do was pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there was anything additional you want to let our readers and our listeners know, and then also how best they can get a hold of you.
I'm on Instagram, Nathan Culla on there. Also Facebook, same. Otherwise, I think that I'm gonna be starting my own podcast soon. So I have Rising Phoenix Wellness podcast in the mix at the moment, but I'm really inspired by what you're doing. So I'm looking at this idea of being a holistic entrepreneur is my new sort of thing that I'm looking at. I'm a holistic health coach, and so I've been trying to integrate. Okay, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What's it mean to be holistically optimized? And trying to figure out how to sort of holistically optimize entrepreneurship. You know what I mean? Because so many of us are in our business. So being able to optimize our minds and our bodies are so important. So I think, just keep in touch on Facebook and on Instagram, sort of hook up with me there. And, I'd love to just stay in touch with people and be able to roll out the podcast soon.
Awesome. And we'll have those links in the show notes just so that you can follow up with you, Nathan. But again, thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Yeah, appreciate it, brother. You're doing a great job, man. Keep inspiring people.
Thank you for listening to the I Am CEO podcast powered by Blue 16 Media. Tune in next time and visit us at IAM158.co. I Am CEO is not just a phrase, it's a community. Be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and everywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating. Grab CEO gear at www.ceogear.co. This has been the I Am CEO podcast with Gresham Harkless. Thank you for listening.